It is great to see you. And like Pastor Ben said, it was a little blustery yesterday, but man, today is beautiful. We are glad that you're here. I want to talk to you about a day that was not so sunny. So December 29th of this last year, December 29th, 2025, I was sitting with my family, Shelly and my boys, in a worship service like this in Bethany, Oklahoma. And we had been down there to visit my in-laws for the Christmas season, and it was the very first Sunday of 2025. And so this is totally, if you're not a church person, let me just fill you in on a little secret. The Sunday after Christmas, the very first Sunday of the new year, every year, is like a preacher's dream, because there's a few passages of Scripture that speak to new beginnings. And so it was no surprise, really, as we were sitting in that service, that even the guest speaker that they had that day, because their pastor was out of town, spoke from the verse that you're going to see on the screen. It's Isaiah chapter 43, verses 18 through 19. So it says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past." Again, 2025. What a great opening verse. Don't dwell on the things of the past, okay? Forget those former things. See, I'm doing a new thing. That's exciting, right? Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Sounds like a really, really great way to start off a brand new year. So what is the new thing that God is doing? Now, here's the deal. I know this passage after, I don't know, it's 2025. I started this in 97, so we're pushing the 30-year mark as far as like preaching and being a pastor. So I've preached this sermon. I've preached this passage before at the beginning of a new year. I've quoted it. But on that day, in that service, I got convicted. It was odd. Not that I might get convicted, but like it was just odd because it was just such a familiar passage to me, and it's one that I'd preached from and read and known and quoted. But I got convicted specifically over those words, "Do you not perceive it?" And for some reason, sitting in that church service, I took that really personal. It's like, hey, back off, dude. What are you talking about? Do you not get it, Rich? Hang on, what are you talking about? For some reason, those words hit me really, really good, because sometimes, guess what? I don't. Sometimes I don't get it. Sometimes I don't see it. Sometimes I don't perceive it. Sometimes I miss the new thing that God might be doing, even right in front of me. That's not really the issue. The issue then becomes, and I really kind of wrestled with this in the days and weeks after sitting in that service, was why do I miss it sometimes? Why do I not perceive the thing that God might be doing right now, right here, in front of you? Why do we miss that sometimes? Now, between you and me, and literally the internet, sometimes I'm focused on the former things. I do. Sometimes I focus on the former things, wishing that there are some things that have happened that didn't happen. Sometimes I get fixated on those things, wishing things had been different. When they played out a certain way, wishing, man, I wish that would have played out this way, because now this and this and this. I spend a lot of time thinking sometimes about those, blaming sometimes things or even people for how things might be today, or a current reality created by former actions. So it's very easy for me to dwell on the former things. The very things he says, forget the former things, don't dwell on the past. There's a reason he says that before he says, do you not perceive that he's doing a new thing? Because there's something about dwelling on the past that causes you to not see the new thing that God is doing. And I'm not trying to be presumptuous, but I'm going to guess maybe I'm not the only person that happens to. Maybe that there's some of us that we miss the things that God might be doing right in front of us because we're stuck thinking about something else. We're stuck thinking about a former thing. So here's the deal right up front. At the beginning of this message and this series, A New Thing, I'm going to pose this question for you every single week. This question you see on the screen. What new thing is God wanting you to see and be a part of? Pretty simple question. But what new thing right now that's going on in your life, in your world, in your circle, in this church, at work, in your relationships? What new thing is God doing that He really wants you to see? He really wants you to see and be a part of it. But that's always going to be followed up by a secondary question. That's why we're talking today. And it's this: what do you need to do to actually see it and then be a part of it? Because sometimes if we sit and think, well, I don't think God's doing anything new in my life right now. I've heard this before. I've said this about myself. I'm in a season of patient waiting. Now, sometimes this means I'm lazy. God's always doing something. He's a creative God. In the beginning, God created. He's never stopped. Okay, so He's always doing something. The question is, do we perceive it? Do we see the new thing that God is doing? And if we don't perceive it, we do have to ask ourselves, all right, why am I not seeing it? Now, for the people of the passage that we're going to look at today, the answer is they didn't see what they needed to see because they had a orientation problem. They needed to be reoriented. Obviously, last Sunday was Easter. It was an amazing service. Thank you for being here and inviting people. If you're back now, we're kind of taking this journey now after the cross, all the way up to the day of Pentecost, and what that looked like for those believers and seekers and followers and soon-to-be followers, for what that experience was like, looking for Jesus after the resurrection. And so what these two individuals that we're going to look at today needed was a reorientation. They were distraught, okay? Jesus, their guy, had been arrested. He'd been tried. He was crucified. But more confusing than all of that was all of a sudden now there was a missing persons issue. So on the third day, Jesus rose, resurrected from the dead. We celebrated that last week. But the reality is there's a whole lot of people that didn't run to the tomb, right? There's a few people that did, a few women, and some of the disciples ran to the tomb. So now there's a lot of hearsay going on. What happened? Where's the body? Did his disciples come and roll away this giant stone, which they couldn't roll away? And all this other different stuff is going on. And so there's a lot of speculation. But honestly, there's a lot of like, what in the world? Like, seriously, you already killed the guy. Now you took his body. Where is he? I know he said that he would rise from the dead, but if he did, then where is he? What's going on? What's taking place? Okay. Now, some people they did. They said he was resurrected. Where was he? There were too many variables. There were too many unanswered questions. And so we see this in Luke 24, verses 13 through 17. Now, that same day, two of them, these are people who'd kind of paid attention and followed Jesus, were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing together as you're walking? Okay. Again, my initial thought is, why were these two people kept from recognizing him? There's all kinds of reasons that we can come up with. There's all kinds of scholars, all kinds of stuff. I kind of think sometimes we make things more confusing than they actually need to be. I think that they didn't recognize him because they weren't looking for him. I think that's one of the major reasons. And I think we can see that in the exchange that follows, Luke 24:17. He asked them, hey, what are you discussing when you're walking along? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened here these days? A little indignant, right? What things? Jesus asked. About Jesus of Nazareth. You, right? He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests, our rulers, handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. There it is. It's 4 words. 4 words that reveal their orientation. But we had hoped. They don't have hope anymore. They had hoped something different would have taken place. They had hoped a picture in their mind would have come to fulfillment. They had hoped But the reason that they're downcast, the reason they don't recognize hope standing right in front of them is because they had hoped. They were no longer hoping. They weren't looking anymore. And I want to tell you something. I can see myself in those words sometimes. I can. And I don't think I'm alone. You know, I had hoped things would have been different. I wanted it to work out. I wish this or that never had happened. And if only such and such, I'm really good at being able to identify, if that thing that those people did would have been different, then this would be different today. I'm pretty good at that. I bet I'm not alone. If those things would have happened, a lot of over-the-shoulder glances, unmet expectations, disappointments, and you know what? Pain, hurt sometimes. That's where these two disciples are on this road to Emmaus. And the conversation starts with this guy, Cleopas. He's basically asking Jesus, dude, I'm glad you're just asking what's going on and what we're talking about, but are you from another planet? Have you not known what's gone on this last week in Jerusalem? Do you not know what's taken place? What that tells me is whoever these two people are that are walking to Emmaus, they had personally invested themselves in at least the idea of Jesus. They personally, at some point in that week prior to his crucifixion, to his death and his resurrection, they caught wind. They were somewhere floating around the periphery, or maybe even just a little bit closer to Jesus, to the point where they were like, I'm going to put my hope in that guy. I think that this guy's the promised guy that's come to do all these things. This guy is the guy that's come to be the Messiah that Israel has talked about and wanted for so long and prayed for, and it's been promised by the prophets. We've been told about this for so long, and look at the miracles, look at the food, look at all the things that Jesus is doing. And then, man, it didn't hurt anything that when he spoke, the things that he said were so subversive and so undercutting to all of the weird religious hierarchy and the governmental stuff that was going on. This guy has shown up, and everything is about to change, and we're here for it. So they got excited. Whoever they were, they put stock in Jesus, at least who they thought they wanted Jesus to be. That's where they placed their hope, in what they believed Jesus to be. That he was the Messiah who was going to redeem Israel. He did. And he does. And he redeems us today. It just didn't look the way they thought it would. Knock the government on its side. Do all those different things. But what they did not expect was the death of a Messiah. Because, here's the deal. Death is death, right? Nothing disqualifies you from a position of leadership more than death. You die, you're not there to do the thing that everybody wants you to do. So why is that important for us? Why do we need to see that right now? Because I think it reveals how easy it is to be in the middle of a story and forget where the storyline is supposed to go. I think it's super easy. Super easy to be in the middle of a storyline and yet in your brain telling yourself a different story and missing the story that's playing out right in front of you. And the reason I say that is the reason that these two people are walking on this road right then at that moment, at that exact time. They'd been participating in the retelling of actually another story. So are you with me? Here's the story. They'd been in Jerusalem for something called the Passover festival. Now, long story short, it was an annual time where all of these Jewish people would gather in Jerusalem and go to the temple, and they would do it for a very specific reason. They would have festivals, they would do all kinds of different things to remember something, to remember how God had redeemed and delivered his people out of slavery years and years and years earlier in Egypt. The Israelites, God's chosen people, they were enslaved in Egypt. They were not their own people. They did not have their own place. They had no land. They didn't even own themselves. They were owned by others, full-on slavery. Okay? So they were slaves, and God redeemed them from that and delivered them out of Egypt and gave them this land of their own. Now, there's a whole process, there's a whole journey there. If you want to read it, go back to somewhere in the early part of the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, read the first 3. It's a long story. But all of that to say, there was no place in their expectations for a dying Messiah. And here's right, because to redeem something means to purchase something at its value. And to buy a life, you give a life. And so when the Passover took place, they marked their doorposts with the blood of a sacrificed animal so that they would be spared and be delivered. Again, it's a huge, long, drawn-out story for another day. But when they would gather in Jerusalem year after year after year to celebrate the Passover, they would come and they would make a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice. A life for a life. And it was a recognition that God had delivered them, had redeemed them through the death of a lamb. And what they failed to understand was the correlation that Jesus was the Lamb of God to take away the sins of the world and die once for all. Once for all. Okay. So they're missing this correlation. There wasn't any place in their orientation for their Messiah to be dead. There wasn't any place. They were so disoriented that they lost their way. And I would say it like this. At some point, they took a turn and they got themselves headed in a wrong direction in a completely different storyline. That's where they were facing at this moment. And that happens to me sometimes. I get oriented to a different storyline. I get fixated on a path, and I'm convinced it's going to take me exactly where I need to go, but at some point, I stop letting Him provide the direction, and something that I want, and something that I desire, and then I even sometimes presume upon God my intentions, saying they're His. And I decide this is the direction that I want things to go. I want it to look this way. It should be this way. It should always be this way. And I orient myself towards that storyline the whole time. God is like, you better look up here at some point because you're about to hit a tree. Because that's not the storyline that's right in front of you. So I want you to look at it this way. You see on the screen various maps. Okay. So where are my Gen X and older people? Raise your hand. Be proud, please. Typical Gen X. Okay. I'm Gen X. All right, so back in the 1900s, when I was learning how to drive, you were handed a paper map, folded all up. I didn't bring one up here because I knew if I unfolded it, I have to fold it back up. And if you've ever unfolded one of those, you can't fold it back up, and I flustered under pressure. So I wasn't going to do that to you. So you get a big old unfolded map, and you hold that map out. So back in 1996, I took the biggest driving personally journey that I had done on my own. And so I drove from Clinton, Illinois, to Hannibal, Missouri, to the Boot Heel of Missouri, and then all the way back home to Chicago at the time. So that was 1996. Just got married to my wife in Clinton, Illinois. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but Hannibal, Missouri is the honeymoon destination of the Midwest for those without money. That's where we went. And so then we went to the Boot Heel, and then we drove home. But here's the deal. I had several maps, actually. I had a map around the St. Louis area. I had an Illinois map. I had a Missouri map. I had a Hannibal, Missouri map. Everywhere we went, we had one of these paper maps, and you unfold it, and you look at it, and you're holding it, and you're like, okay, here's where we are, and here's where we want to go. All right, so we need to get here, and then when we get down here, we need to turn right on such and such, and we need to go down here. We need to, because we see where we want to go. So this was the map, right? Put the map down. Boom. All right, so in 97, Garmin. You guys remember Garmin's? Okay, so Garmin had been around a little while, but then they came out with what you see on the screen there, this little GPS thing that you could mount on your dashboard. And it was a game changer, right? You didn't have to think anymore. You just plug in the things, and it just starts telling you where to go. You literally check your brain at the door and drive. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. But you could just literally go. You just go wherever it tells you to go. But here's the really interesting thing about those. And if you were raised analog and not digital, my brain hiccups sometimes because I'm used to the paper, right? I'm used to the paper map. Oh my word, I sound like I'm 150 years old. I'm used to the paper map, right? And all of a sudden I got this thing that's on my dashboard, and now y'all have it in your pocket. Like it is literally as easy as that. And what's really interesting about that is, as you're looking at a paper map, I was always taught to hold that paper map north, south, east, west. And then when I followed, here was the orientation of the map. On a GPS thing, it's different. If you turn, the map turns. Okay, are you following me there? So on your way home, if you plug in your home address, your map, as you watch it on the screen, turns. You always point the same direction, which is always the right way, right? Okay, so if you've seen that episode of The Office where he drives into the lake, okay, this is my heart. This is where I'm at. Because sometimes I do pretty good. It's mounted there. I see the GPS. I understand it's going to rotate and do all the things that it's going to do. But then if I think too much, my brain just, like, I freak out. Like, wait a minute. My body wants to turn. And I have to recheck my analog brain somewhere else and get back into my digital brain so that I let it do what it's supposed to do. Now, here's what's really, really interesting about these. So, recalculating. Have you ever, in your holiness, told that lady to shut up? I have. I'm not proud of it. But the way it usually plays out, at least in my situation, is this. You're driving along, and as you're kind of plugging along, and it says you're supposed to turn right, but in my brain, I'm like, I kind of like that direction better. So I just keep on going. The next thing you know, as soon as you pass that turn, recalculating. I'm like, okay. In 0.3 miles, turn right on Jefferson Street. Okay, get a little closer. Keep going. Recalculating. In 0.2 miles, turn right on Spruce Street. This is the way. I know it's the way. And here's the deal. Every time, if it's not the way, why is my little arrow not going like this? My arrow is still going straight, right? And so all of a sudden, 0.2 miles, then she's like recalculating, then she freaks out. She's like, she's just cycling. And I'm going, no. And next thing you know, it's like recalculating. In 9 miles, turn right on Interstate 65 or whatever. And I'm thinking, finally, she got on my page. Like, finally, we're going to do what I know is the right thing to do in my storyline. And here's the issue with all of that. I jump back and forth from orienting myself to the map and the map orienting itself to me, and then the struggle begins. And it gets really, really frustrating because it is humbling when the map won't orient to you. We want the map to orient to us. But instead, let me beckon you back to the 1900s. We are to be orienting ourselves to the map, not the other way around. So that's where these two individuals are on this road to Emmaus, and maybe us sometimes, waiting for the map to orient itself to us and meet us in the storyline we'd like to see get played out. Instead, the way literally shows up next to them and reorients them to the right story. So this is what he does. Luke chapter 24, verse 25. He says to them, how foolish, how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? He's quoting to them scripture that they know. They know the storyline. Okay? Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explains to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He's reminding them of the journey. He's reminding them of the storyline that they've been traveling thus far. As they approached the village to where they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, began to give it to them. Then their eyes were open and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" What did he do? He pulled out the map, which pointed to him, and he reoriented them to the map. Sometimes the new thing that God is doing, and I think this is important to understand, sometimes the new thing that God is doing isn't like some big whoopee thing that you're looking forward to. We kind of get that. We live in a consumeristic world where we're like, God's always going to do the bigger and the best thing next. Okay, God does call people to horrible places on the planet to share the gospel. God does send faithful, loving people to places where they will be persecuted, where there will be struggle and there will be suffering. God does those things. And he's with us when he does those things. But I think sometimes we get this idea that the new thing God is always doing is maybe something that you want. And it might require the new thing that God might be showing you, the new thing that God is inviting you to see and be a part of, it might be stepping into the unknown for you. It might be you literally taking the map and like walking off the map. He might take you off the map to go someplace you've never been before, to do something that you've never done before. But in order for that to happen, you got to let go. And sometimes you got to let go of the former things and trust God and embrace what he is doing in your life. If you do not do that, what happens is you miss what God is doing sometimes right in front of you. Or we do not perceive it. We don't perceive it. He orients these two travelers, and one of the first places he points to as a reference point. It's Moses and the Israelites being delivered from slavery. God uprooted them from all that they knew. And the promise was, listen, if you'll follow me, you're going to end up in a land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, abundance, a place for your own peace, joy, yours. And I'll be there with you. It's going to be amazing. Sounds pretty good. But there's a map to get there. And in the middle is the wilderness. And literally, like, they're not even 2 days in. And they're like, okay, this is horrible. This is a bad idea. I do not like the new thing that God is doing. In fact, let's go back to the former things. Let's go, at least when we were slaves, we knew where our food was. Like, at least when we were slaves, we had a place to sleep at night. God, I don't know, this ding-dong that you called to lead us out here in the desert, we don't like your new thing, and we think he's a bad dude, and we want him gone. Like, they start grumbling about everything, all kinds of stuff. And I think sometimes we assume that the new thing that God is going to lead us into is comfort and ease and smooth, but instead, sometimes what it requires is hardship. Sometimes what it requires of us is selflessness and sacrifice and surrender over to what God wants to do and testing. But here's what I can tell you. If you walk into the new thing that God is doing in your life, it will always lead to actual real life. You'll be experiencing an intimacy and a closeness and a connectedness to God that you wouldn't otherwise. Because you'll realize you have to depend on him. It's not about you anymore. It's about him. And I would love to tell you that I've perfected this. I think the people that are closest to me know that I haven't. In fact, as I said before, I'm an expert in the past. I can point to where something got off course. I can point to the issues. I can point to the things, the problems, the cause. The dropped balls. I can point to all of those different things. If only it would have just, or if only they would have just. I can point to those things, but the problem is God does literally have a map in front of me saying, dude, you better look up from your map here in a second because you're about to miss a turn. You're about to miss the invitation that's being extended to you to be a part of something so much more than where your storyline would take you. I'm learning, I think, to trust and follow, even if it leads me off the map that I carry around for myself. And if you feel like God's doing a new thing in your life, can I just challenge you today here at the beginning of this series? Embrace it. I hope that over the course of these next few weeks and the next couple of months, you begin to really sense that God is speaking to your heart and your life about a new thing. I can't think of a better way to mark that new beginning or embracing that new thing God is doing in your life than being baptized. If you've professed a faith in Jesus Christ, and even today if you profess your faith in Jesus Christ and have never been baptized, on the back of that blue card you can mark baptism. We're going to have another service here in a month or a month and a half and baptize some people. I would encourage you to fill that out. Bring it to the welcome desk or drop it in a box in the back. Give it to an usher. But here's the deal. If you feel like God's doing a new thing in your life, embrace it. I can tell you right now, there have been times when God has asked me to look up from my map so I don't miss a turn in a new thing that He has done, and I've missed His turns. Now, He's faithful. In 0.3 miles, Rich, turn. 0.6 miles, Rich, turn. Even 9 miles, Rich, turn right. And He's so smart, He tricks me into believing I'm still on my map. I'm still going to go to the destination that He has for me. A lot of it just depends on the journey that I want to take in order to get there. So I just want to encourage you, if God is showing you a new thing in your life, embrace it. Embrace it. If you're somebody who has to have all the answers for how all the pieces fit together and how it's all going to play out, and there's the 7-year plan for how every single day that you wake up is going to work, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know that God operates that way. Instead, He says, trust me, I am with you. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. He's with you because He wrote the map. He wrote the story. And so I'm personally praying for myself that this would be a good descriptor of me, that I'm willing to embrace the new thing that God is doing in my life and that you are too. So, what new thing is God wanting you to see and be a part of? That's a question for you to answer. And if you're struggling to see it, right, what do you need to do to be able to see the new thing that God might be asking you to be a part of? Maybe it's a commitment for a month to get up just a little bit earlier and spend some time in His Word and ask Him, speak to me, show me. Maybe it's seeking some wise counsel, which is always a good idea. Find somebody who represents a spiritual life that you want to emulate and say, hey, I'm looking for the new thing that God's asking me to be a part of. Would you help me look? God can use other people to do that. Whatever it is that God shows you, embrace that and start looking. Start looking. Looking forward to this